you're walking with me through the streets of Miami. I'm actually just going for my morning stroll, getting sun, and I'm on my way to Prada. Now, I'm not there to go get sunglasses because I'm not a fool. And I know that I want to get light into my eyes in the morning to right through that retinal hypothalamic train, right? And that activates MSH, which helps regulate your cortisol, which lowers your histamine, regulates your serotonin, and then it raises your T3 and you make your sex hormone. So it's a part of living a more equatorial life that's conducive for health, keeping the electrons flowing and optimizing your health. I'm not a fool. I'm not going to wear sunglasses and block the UV light that we actually need for our health. And I am going to go to Prada, though. I am going to get new boots for a presentation I'm doing. So you're going on with me a walk as we head to the store and we head to Prada. But the deal is, this takes us to blind spots. And what are we not seeing? And a lot of you are confused because there's so many health influencers and natural doctors that are brilliant in their own right. But even me probably has some shortcomings, and I'm continuing to learn along the path. Yes, I overcame MS. Yes, I overcame scoliosis. Yes, I overcame Lyme disease, the things that most people can't and will never. But at the same time, I'm always trying to figure out where my blind spots are. And when we look at the social media influencers, I'm constantly watching the content and analyzing it and seeing what they're saying. And you're on a spiritual journey, right? And the problem you have here is so many people are on this journey and then they want to heal and they get in that place where they're like, I love myself. I finally accept myself. I feel fantastic. But then they reject everything around them because they feel like they've already healed. So you don't want to be the person who is on that healing journey, which every person here is a soul. You're just a meat suit is all that you are. And you're this spiritual being having a human experience and you're just learning. And you don't want to be the person that has gone through that healing journey, that went and did the ayahuasca and then rejects everything. And it's like, my intuition told me, I know this is right. And then later the dildo of unintended consequences comes to beat you over the head because you were too stubborn and pig-headed to really analyze and really discern whether what you thought was true or not true or whatever the case. So when it comes to Robert Lustig, and he's on this rant now about sugar and how sugar is the cause of all disease, it's the root of evil. Come on now. Sunlight, glucose, oxygen, that's how you make ATP and you make less free radicals. If you go on a keto diet, I got news for you. You're going to lose weight because it's going to increase cortisol. But long term, you're going to downregulate your T3 and you're not going to make your sex hormones and your tissue is going to get weak and you're going to have a lot of injuries. You know, it's you got to understand, right? He berades fructose. Fructose lowers phosphorus levels. So if you have kidney problem, you need fructose. You need fructose, you need sunlight. So this is insane. And when we look at these studies, many of these epidemiological studies are very problematic in the fact that they leave out a lot of variables and they can't study people for long periods of time. And who the hell is keeping track of every little nuance they're doing in their life? They're just looking at one factor. So probably the best type that you want to look at is randomized controlled studies. If you're going to look at studies, read those and try to decipher the information that's in those. And it's going to give you a more accurate view of what's actually occurring. And it's more non-biased, right? You know, if you deal with only researching and reading articles that are written by Harvard or UCLA, understand that they are getting sponsored is what they're doing, right? So they decide that they're going to do a test and trial. And then they decide who is going to sponsor it, right? And they put out an ad and who wants to sponsor this study. So now you got this study being done and the data is manipulated because they have to get a certain outcome because they want to get the funding. So are you really getting the truth? Fuck no, you're not getting the truth. So we live in a society now where money is the false idol, right? And the people do anything to get the pair of Prada boots. Like, that's where I'm going, right? But you can have the more pristine things in life and You can have the fancy things, the cars, the houses, you can have all that, but you don't want to push yourself so hard that you burn out, sacrifice your health. You don't want to burn relationships so that you can have the finances and the money and the silver spoon, right? This is something that's about balance. Again, life is about balance. So let's go back to the health influencers that have their blind spots on, right? I brought up Robert Lustig and his disdain for sugar, but I'm going to cover even some of my favorite people out there and where they might have some shortcomings in their research and what they're trying to figure out. So you never want to think you know it all, right? You never want to think you're completely healed. You can be super conscious and still have blind spots. So Jack Kruse, probably one of my favorite, and I follow all of his information on physics and light. And granted, he doesn't get into the spirituality component. He's missing that piece, but he thinks that omega-3s are beneficial, and he thinks it's okay to eat fish, and it's not about food, but that is a piece. So the food is something to concern yourself with. That's lower on the totem pole. Remember, it's number 5 on my list. The mind is number 1, and number 2 is the environment of lighting electromagnetic fields. But, Jack likes fish, and he thinks poof is good. But poof oxidizes under heat and light. It lacks hydrogen bonds. It's unstable. So that lowers hep C in your liver and creates unbound iron that oxidizes. But at the same time, UVB light is also poof protective. So how much sunlight are you getting? How much fish are you eating? Is it really causing a lot of damage? Look, ruminant animals are always going to be the best source. So I play it safe. I just only eat ruminant animals. I stay away from fish. I stay away from chicken. When I was eating 15 pounds of chicken a week as a bodybuilder, I had my blind spot on. I said, it's organic chicken. How bad could organic chicken really be? Is it really that high in linoleic acid? It can't be, right? Well, my ignorance led me down a path of having iron oxidation. And then I have MS, and I can't figure out why, but I'm eating freaking 15 pounds of chicken a week. And I was making these hydroxyl radicals that are demyelinating my nerves. So I was the idiot causing my own fucking problem. And I'm like, I'm eating chicken and rice and vegetables, and, I'm healthy, right? I was not eating enough fruit to lower the phosphorus levels from all the protein I was consuming too. So, I was causing protein misfolding. There was all kinds of blind spots I had, and just ignoring it because I didn't want to spend the money on organic grass-fed beef, right? It was more expensive than the free-range chicken that they're feeding seeds and grains. So the chicken's unhealthy, right? That's the issue. Yeah, it may not have antibiotics or hormones, but the chicken's unhealthy because they're feeding it seeds and grains, and sometimes even canola. So then you eat that, and that goes within you. And now the linoleic acid clogs the cell membrane, so it can't get in. You got insulin resistance. You got all kinds of health problems. Dysregulated iron is one of the biggest problems most people have. So, does Jack have it all right? I think pretty damn close. And I think environment's a bigger deal than the food. He's right about that. But he's not perfect, right? I mean, the guy's not in shape. If he was really focused on everything, he'd probably be a little bit more fit. He'd probably be exercising a little bit more than he is, because it's not just all environment either. And so I'm also friends with Healthy because they're feeding it. And in the past, he was fat for fuel guy, and now he's made a giant switch over to Ray Peat and the metabolic. You write Healthy because they're feeding it seeds and grains, and sometimes even he's on the right path, and he's had to pivot, and he's great at pivoting and admitting when he's wrong. But now he's on this other kick where he's trying to deplete. He thinks he's too high in iodine, right? So now he's trying to deplete his levels of iodine, and he thinks that everyone should deplete their levels of iodine, that it's bad for your thyroid. And so that's his new thing. Well, what he hasn't figured out yet is that he's drinking raw milk and they clean the equipment with iodine. So his levels of iodine might be high from that, not from the consumption. Most people actually are very low in iodine and would do very well with supplementing with it. And I'm not a fan of supplementing. I think that you can get most of the stuff from food, but at the same time, we got to test, right? You want to verify, not just randomly do shit because. So I think he's going to discover that in his own time. He's very bright and is able to pivot very well. Lane Norton. I like Lane. I followed him back in my bodybuilding days. But let's face it, the guy is too sensible, right? He's like, oh, well, Diet Coke, no big deal, no calories, right? Forget the fact that aspartame actually caused cancer in rats. Yeah, it's low dose. It's not going to do anything. Yeah, it creates a bit of insulin resistance. The studies are there, but let's ignore them and say it's dose dependent, right? So I get his reasoning, totally understand it. But many times we justify what we want to have in our lives because it's not so bad, right? It's only 2 drinks tonight. It's only this pizza that has fortified wheat, and it's got tomatoes that were grown in used car tires, and it's got cheese that's not raw, it's pasteurized with growth hormones, and it has vegetable rennet from Pfizer in it. It's just one time, right? But that one time adds up and it's cumulative, and then it creates problems, and then the dildo unintended consequences gets us. So I think Lane's right with some balance there, but at the same time, like, why not be better? There's always room to strive to be better. And so, if you don't think you can do better, you're not going to do better, and your life situation is going to prove you're always going to be broke, you're always going to be overweight, and you're always going to be uneducated, right? And you're always going to have poor relationships. You're not going to be able to communicate in society. I mean, people like to talk to others that can actually enrich their lives, actually have something to offer. If you have nothing to offer, a lot of times nobody's going to be in your life at all. So, and then oh, this is my favorite one. Brian Johnson, the vegan. And you can do veganism. I think you can do it healthy. There's a product called Space Milk that I think is absolutely fantastic. It is brewer's yeast. It's blasted with electromagnetically charged particles of water to break down the cell wall so the amino acids are bioavailable. And it has very similar amino acid spectrum as whey protein. So I think it's actually fantastic. But I think you can be vegan and be healthy, but the way that he's going and waking up in the morning, putting blue light in your eyes, like, that's kind of insane. Like, just go outside, bro. Like, what are you doing? And, his products that have subpar ingredients, that he's selling, and, all the pills he's taking, dude, you could get all that stuff from food and connect with nature. And, what about the consciousness? What about the flow of electrons that are controlled through your thought and the subconscious mind? What about your past fears and traumas that are there, right? That are preventing the flow of electrons, because that exists too. And, I get it. The guy's doing things, and he hired a team of doctors that's advising him, but I think he's got the wrong team of doctors advising him, and he's doing a lot of experiments on himself, probably at the detriment of himself. That's going to maybe benefit some people later on, but I think he's a few screws short, from actually hitting the goals he's looking to obtain, right? A day late and a dollar short. And unfortunately, he's probably going to pay for that. But anyway, the deal is what you have to understand is you can overcome anything, any disease. There's one thing holding you back, and that's yourself. Because ultimately, if you know you're going to get well, the universe is going to deliver you the right people. And there's more than one way to get to a solution. And I prefer my way. Obviously, it's how I got well. And I'm biased a little bit towards that. And I'm open-minded also to other people. But I see a lot of misinformation and a lot of oversights with most healthcare practitioners or health influencers. And most of it is based off of vanity and looking a certain way. So health is not about only how you look. The true way to health is to trace the electron and how it's flowing and what free radicals are being produced. If you have excessive peroxynitrate, hydroxyl radicals, high histamine, high glutamate levels, dude, it's only a matter of time until you wind up with an illness, like maybe it's even a retina detachment, right? My friend in Florida this last week, right, that she had 3 cavities, and they told her she needed a root canal. And I'm like, okay, I don't see anything energetically but there's probably something there. And she brought up a time a while ago when I was working on my health energetically, and my health was testing on a 10 out of 1 to 10, but I could go eat into each individual organ and test them. So maybe my spleen would be at like a 4 or 5, but my overall health, other organs were making up for it for the flow of energy. So what happened is I went and worked on each individual organ and each individual gland. It was even to improve the flow of energy through my body at even greater capacity. But I did the same thing with her. She said, what about the time when you did that thing with each individual organ and gland? I said, oh, that's interesting. Let me check that. So I went into the nerves, right? Because she was having teeth pain, right? So I did bones, and bones deal with support. And I worked with the belief systems, right? So she didn't feel supported. Not now, but earlier on in childhood, right? Didn't feel supported, didn't feel accepted. So we worked on that. And we worked on the nerves and being able to feel. And I had her say something that made her really uncomfortable. And I had her say, I'm okay being in a relationship, because she has this adversity towards being in a relationship with a man or woman. She doesn't want to be in a relationship with anyone. She's chosen to be asexual. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're consciously choosing it. But if you're choosing it because of a past experience or a fear of being hurt, different story, right? That's a fear-based decision, not a heart-based decision, and that affects the flow of electrons through our body. So I worked on the subconscious mind. What do you know? Her teeth don't hurt anymore. She doesn't even have the nerve pain, and she doesn't need a root canal at the moment. So far, so good. It's been a couple weeks, I think, and no more tooth decay is present. No more tooth pain is present. Let's hope that continues. But the whole thing of it is that was just in the emotions. So you're looking for health outside of you with all these guys like Robert Lustig, Dr. Mercola, Jack Cruz, Lane Norton, and Brian Johnson for the external things, but it's really an internal thing that needed to change. Your mind is the number one factor. Your mind, and not just your conscious mind, it's your subconscious mind. It's the internalization, denial, and disconnection from emotions. So while I talk about what research studies to look at, your mind's even more important. And you have to control that. What you seek is always seeking you. The health, the love, the money, it's always seeking you. But you are the resistance. So you must understand there is no room for a charge. There is no room for fear. You must just exist and pay attention to the world around you and get rid of the blind spots. Because that worst thing you could be is that person that has a blind spot that's in the coffee shop, that's ordering the coffee in the Danish because they have an addiction, drooling on themselves to get their caffeine fix and to shove their face with a bunch of processed foods because they have an aversion to making conscious decisions in their life, and they're too addicted to feeling good, and they're looking at external factors. Be mindful of every decision you make. Blind spots.